So Brian Stelter attended a panel, or he was a part of a panel. It looks like this was put on by the Atlantic for the Institute of Politics. And the name of this discussion was Disinformation and the Erosion of Democracy. Now, this happened over the weekend. It was from April 6th to April 8th. And I want to go ahead and share my screen to show you what is going on here. Now, there is a gentleman who is going to ask Brian a question. This gentleman is in the audience and he's only a freshman. And I want you to pay close attention to the question that he starts to ask him. So here we go.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Christopher Phillips. I'm a first year at the college. My question is for Mr. Stelter. You've all spoken extensively about Fox News being a purveyor of disinformation, but CNN is right up there with them. They pushed the Russian collusion hoax. They pushed the Jussie Smollett hoax. They smeared Justice Kavanaugh as a rapist, and they also smeared Nick Sandmann as a white supremacist. And yes, they dismissed the Hunter Biden laptop affair as pure Russian disinformation. With mainstream corporate journalists becoming little more than apologists and cheerleaders for the regime, is it time to finally declare that the canon of journalistic ethics is dead or no longer operative? All the mistakes of the mainstream media, and CNN in particular, seem to magically all go in one direction. Are we expected to believe that this is all just some sort of random coincidence, or is there something else behind it?
Haha, I want to remind you again, he's only a freshman. So this question is directed to Brian. Let's hear Brian's response.
It's too bad. It's time for lunch.
You have 30 seconds.
No, I mean, there's a clock that says 30 seconds. But I think my honest answer to you, and I'll come over and talk in more detail after this, is that I think you're describing a different channel than the one that I watch. But I understand that that is a popular right-wing narrative about CNN. I think it's important when we talk about shared reality and democracy, all these networks, all these news outlets have to defend democracy. And when they screw up, admit it. But when Benjamin Hall, the Fox correspondent, was wounded in Ukraine, the news crews at CNN and the New York Times stopped what they were doing, and they tried to help. They tried to help him get out of the country. They tried to find the dead crew members. That's what news outlets do. That's how they actually do work together, to your question about sharing those kinds of connections and trust. We don't talk about it enough, though. We don't share that reality about how that happens. And with regards to the regime, I think you mean President Biden. The last time I spoke with a Biden aide, we yelled at each other. So that's the reality of the news business that people don't see, that people don't hear. They imagine that it's a situation that simply is not. But I think your question, it speaks to the failure of journalism to show our work and show the reality of how our profession operates. We have a lot of work to do, I think.
That was a lot of fluff. That was a lot of fluff. I'm going to go back through and we're going to pick this apart. Let's go back. And I want you to listen to the question that he is asking him again. I think Brian thought he was really going to wiggle his way out of that one. This, by the way, was trending on Twitter, FYI. But I have to say, I am immensely proud of the young generation of Gen Z because they're seeing it. And this is what I wanted to happen, right? This is why I told you guys I really need to reach the young people because I was afraid that they weren't getting this message, that they were believing that these networks were not biased, that they were real, legit news, that they were telling stories the factual way and not in a biased manner. And it really warmed my heart to see that here is someone, this young gentleman, he's a freshman, he's really young, and he's able to see past the BS. So that really meant a lot to me. I'm glad he asked that question. I'm going to go ahead back in, and here we go.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Christopher Phillips. I'm a first year at the college. My question is for Mr. Stelter. You've all spoken extensively about Fox News being a purveyor of disinformation, but CNN is right up there with them. They pushed the Russian collusion hoax. They pushed the Jussie Smollett hoax. They smeared Justice Kavanaugh as a rapist, and they also smeared Nick Salmon as a white supremacist. And yes, they dismissed the Hunter Biden laptop affair as pure Russian disinformation.
So you see right there, even he is able to see when Brian says, oh, well, Fox News, that's just like fake news or whatever, or it's biased, yada, yada. This young man is able to see, guess what, Brian? I've noticed that CNN does the same thing. I've noticed that CNN has the same problem. And he's bringing up past events, and he's bringing up a recent one, which is the Hunter Biden laptop story, which, by the way, people really didn't want to talk about. MSNBC didn't want to talk about it. CNN didn't want to talk about it. I played a clip about a week or two ago where Brian actually got into a heated conversation with another journalist who was upset with him because he would not cover that story. And when it comes to journalism, like, you're not supposed to do that. You can't play favorites when it comes to an investigation. And I really do feel like that was done on purpose. And I told you guys back then, like, they did, of course, they didn't want to cover it. If it was Trump and it was Ivanka's laptop, CNN would have had no problem covering that story. And I think more people are starting to wake up and are starting to see the bias now that Trump is not in office. They're starting to see the same networks that had no problem attacking Trump for being fraudulent, for not doing the quote unquote right thing, for having bad finance deals, are not willing to call out Joe Biden for being corrupt as well. And it just, again, it really made me proud to see a young person having this conversation and this awakening. Let's go back in because he goes on.
With mainstream corporate journalists becoming little more than apologists and cheerleaders for the regime, is it time to finally declare that the canon of journalistic ethics is dead or no longer operative? All the mistakes of the mainstream media, and CNN in particular.
So he notices that even mainstream media has these mistakes. He is noticing that, hey, maybe these journalists' ethics that are supposed to be in place don't really apply that much anymore like they used to a long time ago. My dad used to tell me when he watched the news growing up, you got the facts. That was it. No opinion, just the facts. Of course, things changed later on. Some people remember someone named Walter Cronkite. And if you talk to like a lot of older people, they'll tell you, I remember when Walter Cronkite used to do the news. It has changed because it's no longer news per se. It's more so infotainment. And this is why people like Rachel Maddow and Tucker Carlson were able to get away with, when they were faced with accusations of not doing real journalist reporting, they were able to bypass that because they said that they are infotainment, that they're not news. The problem is a lot of people that watch them don't realize that. Some people do, but some people don't. That's the problem. Some people think that when they watch Rachel Maddow, that they are getting the real news. When they watch Tucker Carlson, that they are getting the real news. They don't know that it's infotainment because it's not presented that way. It's presented like an actual news show. So let's go back in.
Seem to magically all go in one direction. Are we expected to believe that this is all just some sort of random coincidence, or is there something else behind it?
Boom. Another great question. He said, are we expected to believe that this is just a coincidence, or is there something behind it? Listen to Brian again.
It's too bad. It's time for lunch.
You have 30 seconds.
No, I mean,
Brian.
there's a clock that says 30 seconds. But I think my honest answer to you, and I'll come over and talk in more detail after this, is that I think you're describing a different channel than the one that I watch.
See? Brian says you're watching a different channel than the one that I watch. No, there's only one CNN. You know, Brian's not stupid here. Obviously, he's not going to throw his own network under the bus. That's his job. But this kid sees what's going on. He knows what's up. And Brian, of course, is going to defend CNN. He says this is his honest answer. These commentators on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, they have become very good at lying. Very good at lying. He doesn't even flinch when he says it. Here's my honest answer.
But I understand that that is a popular right-wing narrative about CNN.
Now he tries to blame the right. See what I mean? The gentleman who stood up and asked the question, did he say if he was on the left or the right? No, he didn't. He didn't describe being affiliated with any particular political party. And yet, Brian is using that same talking point. Oh, well, that's the criticism that CNN gets from the right. No, Brian, CNN gets that criticism from the left as well. And Brian knows that because there have been left independent media commentators that have been on CNN. Brianna Joy Gray has been on CNN. Kyle Kulinski has been on CNN. I think Crystal Ball has been on there at one point or another, and I think Katie Halper might have been on there as well. So Brian is not stupid. So the fact that he's using that same line that we continue to hear them use, oh, that criticism, that's what people on the right say. And this is where the smears will come in. Anytime you criticize a liberal network or you criticize a conservative network, the smear is that you were on the other side. So people shouldn't believe what you say because you're a part of the other team. You cannot use that excuse towards people that are part of no team. None. And this gentleman in the audience didn't claim a team. And so when you have people like me that will tell you, I'm not for the Republican Party and I'm not for the Democratic Party. I can say this over and over and over and over again. People will still try to say, I'm a Russian asset. People will say, well, she's secretly on the right. There's nothing to be secret about politically for me. Why do I need to keep that a secret? If I was on the right, that is something I would be open and public about. I wouldn't have to hide that. And honestly, I'm going to be honest with you. There's a lot more money on the right. There's money on the left. Don't get me wrong. There are people on the left making a lot of money, but most of the money is on the right. Look at people like Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, Glenn Beck, Dave Rubin. Where are we putting him these days? Is he still libertarian? Is he on the right? Where are we putting him? Whatever. Most of the money is on the right. So why would anyone be secretly on the right in this space if you were just trying to grift and make money? That doesn't make any sense. But that's what they'll do. They'll smear you. They'll come back with all sorts of things just so people don't believe you because they know that what you're saying is true. They just don't want to get caught. They have to continue to preach the same narrative so that they'll still get paid. It's sad. Here we go.
I think it's important when we talk about shared reality and democracy, all these networks, all these news outlets have to defend democracy. And when they screw up, admit it.
But they don't. He said all these networks have to defend democracy, and when they screw up, admit it. But they don't. Even CNN, when they've made mistakes, there's been times they didn't go back and correct those mistakes. They continued smearing. Look at what's happening right now, even with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. There are things that they've said about this conflict on CNN that were not true. They didn't come back and retract it. This is the thing. Like, we've seen this happen multiple times where they reported on stories, even with Joe Rogan. And I said it back then. Joe Rogan should have sued CNN. That was slander. Did they come back and apologize to Joe Rogan and say, oh, what we said was incorrect? No, they didn't. They doubled down on that story. Keep lying, Brian.
But when Benjamin Hall, the Fox correspondent, was wounded in Ukraine, the news crews at CNN and the New York Times stopped what they were doing, and they tried to help. They tried to help him get out of the country. They tried to find the dead crew members.
He mentions the New York Times and CNN stopped what they were doing, and they tried to help. he fails to mention that the New York Times and CNN are both liberal outlets. He's talking about this as if the New York Times is a conservative publication. It's not. It's liberal, just like CNN.
That's what news outlets do. That's how they actually do work together, to your question about sharing those kinds of connections and trust. We don't talk about it enough, though. We don't share that reality about how that happens. And
they don't share it because it doesn't happen. Listen, what? Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. The networks that are working together are the networks that have the same narrative. CNN is not working together with Fox News. They might work together with MSNBC, or like he just told you, the New York Times. They have the same narrative. That makes sense. Of course, they're going to collaborate together. Brian is talking about this as if they are going leaps and bounds to work together with other networks and publications that don't have the same narrative. And that doesn't happen. You don't see CNN and Fox News working together. Everybody knows that Fox News is the conservative network. Everyone knows that CNN is the liberal network. That's a given. So where is this collaboration that Brian is speaking of? Because I don't see that happening. They both criticize each other. They work against each other. They're not working together. CNN smears Fox News smears CNN. They're not working together as a unit.
with regards to the regime, I think you mean the President Biden. The last time I spoke with a Biden aide, we yelled at each other. So that's the reality of the news business that people don't see, that people don't hear.
People don't see it and hear it because you don't talk about it. Notice he said, you mentioned the Biden regime. The last time I spoke with the Biden aide, we got into an argument. But notice he didn't elaborate about the regime. He didn't really answer his question. He mentioned the Biden regime, but he didn't elaborate on it. He stopped right there and then switched to, I got into an argument with the Biden aide and didn't comment on the Biden regime fact, though.
They imagine that it's a situation that simply is not.
It's all in our imagination, you guys. We're imagining all of this going on. It's not really happening. Did you know that? This is what they'll do. You know, one of the big dangerous things, and Kim Iverson was right about this. One of the most dangerous things that we have in this country is the media. That's one of the most dangerous things because they are the ones that control the narrative, and there's so much propaganda. And this is why I tell people sometimes turn your TV off. There's so much propaganda. Mainstream media will have you hating the people that you should actually love and have you loving the people that you should hate. Mainstream media will do that. Mainstream media can build someone up, whether they're a celebrity or not, and they can tear someone down. It's all about the perspective. Look at the way, we'll go back to old school music again. Look at the way mainstream media will build up musicians, certain musicians, and then they'll tear them down. And I'm going to use an example that I know quite a bit a lot. Eminem. When Eminem first came out, he was very popular, and his popularity continued to grow and grow and grow and grow. Mainstream media didn't like some of the songs that Eminem had, didn't like some of his lyrics. And mainstream media really tried to destroy Eminem's character. I remember this. I remember kids burning Eminem CDs. I remember all of that. Now, Eminem was able to weather through it, but For some people, that does not happen. Like I said, they will build you up and they will tear you down. Something to think about.
But I think your question, it speaks to the failure of journalism to show our work and show the reality of how our profession operates.
No, his question speaks to the failure of journalism, about journalism not telling the full story and not telling the truth. It speaks to journalism being biased and journalism, again, preaching a narrative that they want you to follow and they want you to believe instead of just telling you the facts of the situation of the story that happened that day. That is what he's talking about. Hunter Biden laptop. Why didn't Brian cover that story? Why didn't he talk about it? Let's be real. Why did Fox News talk about it? It goes with Fox News narrative. It does not go with CNN narrative. It doesn't. And he was called out on that.
We have a lot of work to do, I think.
Well, he's right about that part. They do have a lot of work to do. But don't be fooled. Brian knows what's up. Brian knows that when he goes into work that he's given a script. See, I've been in these studios. I know how it works. For those of you who are new, who don't know, I majored in broadcast journalism and English. So I've been in local news stations. I've been in CNN. I know how it works. So it's not like here where I can just jump in front of my webcam and just talk freely. I don't have a script. There's no one giving me a script that says, Sabrina, this is what you need to talk about. This is what you have to read. I don't have that. That's the beauty of this. The narrative that I have is my own. There's no producer. Well, Eric's my producer, but there's no producer telling me what I can and cannot say. I don't have an earpiece where someone's talking into my ear telling me it's time to cut and go to commercial when someone mentions something that's controversial. That happens a lot. I'm going to go to some of the comments in the chat. I see Black in the Empire is in the house. Thanks for the super chat, Black in the Empire. I'm just fed up with all of this nonsense. Agreed. Yipper99 said he is a professional stenographer and he couldn't comprehend his question. That's a good point. Yasmin says, I'm telling you, I'm so proud of Gen Z. They're seeing right through the establishment faster than us millennials were. I agree, Yasmin. It took me some time. It definitely took me some time. I agree. Monarch says, Sabby, what were you thinking? That was a long time ago, Monarch. That was a long time ago. I told you I used to be a Democrat. That was a long time ago. I thought they were the right thing. Oh, man. You're bringing back memories now. Or actually, I'm bringing back the memories. Yikes. Oh, AOHTO6, hoot, something like that. To be fair, Gen Z has way more content calling it out than we millennials did initially, especially when Obama first came on the scene. That's a good point. Yeah, that is a very good point because social media was relatively new at that point when Obama ran for president the first time. You are not invisible, hash rebel. I see you. I see you. I agree, Lee. It's not left versus right. It's top versus bottom. Yes, I agree. I talk about class a lot on this show. Jonathan says, question, do you think his question was too lengthy? So I think it's supposed to be Stelter was able to skirt around it. That is a tactic that some people will use sometimes. Like if the question is too long, they'll just talk around the question. I try to keep my questions short and to the point, straight to the point, so that people can't do that. But some people still will do that, and I'll just ask the question again, just to be honest with you. Where Pilgrim said Twitter had just started when Obama got in office, took a while for it to catch on. Right. Yeah. Because Facebook was the more popular social media platform at that point. I hear you.